Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, CFL Week 18 edition. Ian Cameron solo show this week. 3 games. We figured we'd give Will Arndt a well-deserved week off. He'll be back probably next week joining me here on the CFL edition of the Football Frenzy. But we only have 3 games because 3 teams have bye weeks in the CFL this week. Edmonton, Montreal, Winnipeg. All of them not in action with the bye week. So just 3 games. Let's jump right into it. This will be a nice quick show this week. We'll start with Saskatchewan, Ottawa. Saskatchewan, 5-point road favorites, 53.5 the total in this game. This number came down to as low as 3.5 earlier in the week with Saskatchewan as road favorites. And there was a juiced 3 out there for a period of time, and I jumped on that when I saw it. Now, I know Saskatchewan's hit a bit of turbulence here. Blowout loss to the Montreal Alouettes, and McLeod Bethel Thompson, of all people, lighting up their defense before the bye week. And then they come out of the bye week, and the offense was miserable. It was terrible. Trevor Harris and the Rider offense really couldn't get anything going. He was inaccurate. That's about as inaccurate and off the mark with his throwing and his passes that I've seen Trevor Harris all year. Didn't look recognizable what we saw from him throwing the football against Edmonton. The one thing I regret, and I ended up on Saskatchewan, obviously it ended up as a loss. The one thing I regret was not factoring in enough the emotional bent that the Elks would play with last week with the passing of their owner, Larry Thompson. And clearly you could see that game mattered to them. They wanted to win it for their recently deceased owner who just recently passed away. And certainly they played like a team that definitely wanted the victory there against Saskatchewan. And their own offense, Cody Fajardo, started slow, but started to get things going. The defense bottled up, that's as much as I've seen Trevor Harris and the offense struggle this year, but credit to Edmonton. They made the plays at the end. They were able to get the win. Now, Saskatchewan goes down the field. Looks like they're going to tie the game on the final play. Well, they get a touchdown to get it to within 2. Saskatchewan needs the 2-point conversion to tie the game, but again, product of what kind of day it was for Trevor Harris. He wasn't even close on the 2-point conversion attempt. So very disheartening loss for Saskatchewan. However, before we start to get really concerned about Saskatchewan, if you're ever going to get out of this funk, it's here against Ottawa. Ottawa is a dumpster fire. They're already trading players away, good players away. They sent Lorenzo Malden to the Calgary Stampeders. It's a very good pass rusher, very good defensive end. And it's not like Ottawa's defense has played well and you're trading away one of your better pass rushers. So that tells you where Ottawa is. They're kind of waving the white flag. Sean Burke, the GM, kind of looking to the future. Now with this Red Blacks team, they're kind of punting here on the season. Not that, and it probably is over for them. They're just too far out of it. So, I just thought once this number got down to 3, it just got way too cheap on Saskatchewan. I know Saskatchewan's hit a bit of a rough patch here, but you're certainly better than Ottawa. You're coached better than Ottawa. You're coached much better than Ottawa when you're talking Corey Mace compared to Bob Dice at this point in time. I thought once that got down to 3, I had to bet Saskatchewan. Now, even at 5, I lean Riders. Riders team total over could be a consideration here. I trust this offense to be better here, especially now with Ottawa, starting to go back the other way and give up points in recent weeks, other than facing Chris Streveler. And whenever you're facing Chris Streveler like Ottawa was, you can't give Ottawa too much credit for obviously looking good on defense in that game. So I think the Riders over their team total of 29.5. That could be worth a look here as well. All right, Saturday, we have a doubleheader. Hamilton, my Ticats, and the Toronto Argonauts. Hamilton, 1.5-point road favorites, 57.5 the total. You guys know I always shoot straight when it comes to the Ticats. Honestly, I'll tell you when it's a good time and a good spot to bet on them. I'll tell you when it's a good time and a good spot to bet against them. And I think it's a good spot to bet on them here. They're coming off an absolute debacle versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers last week, 40-3 blowout loss. Weren't even in that football game. It was ugly right from the start, and it never got any better. You could tell the moment they gave up that kick return touchdown right at the start. You knew it was going to be a long day for the Hamilton Ticats in that game, and it was. It was just not a very good performance from them. Now they go into Toronto. Everybody from Scott Milanovic, the head coach, Bo Levi Mitchell, the quarterback, talking about we're better than that, and it's time we show it. And they know the urgency. And the Ticats, I think, understand the urgency with Montreal now right behind their nipping at their heels, right behind them for first in the East Division. They haven't sealed anything away just yet. They just got Davis Alexander back, and look at the way he played in his return for the Alouettes last week against Calgary. They know they got to start put wins on the board if they want to nail down this East Division down the stretch. And I think this is the right opponent to get. Arbuckle, I believe, is going to play here, but he has been banged up for the last couple weeks. It's just a sign that, hey, they have no faith in Jarrett Dagey. Why would they, the Toronto Argonauts? This defense, though, continues to struggle. And the offense is pretty much one-dimensional. They throw the ball. They can't run the football. And Hamilton actually has been really alarmingly bad with their run defense, but I don't think Toronto can exploit it because they just don't run the football well at all. And half the time, they don't even try to run the football, the Toronto Argonauts. So I think this for Hamilton is a spot where they can bounce back. They've had no problem moving the football on Toronto. And I also like how this sets up because they got their heart ripped out by this Argos team on Labor Day, where Hamilton looked like they had won the game with a last-minute touchdown, and then they give up the big kick return, with 15 seconds left, and it was the big play down the field, and Toronto ends up going out of bounds. We thought maybe he had gone out of bounds with time expired, but there was 1 second left, and it allowed Liram Hiralahu to come on and kick the game-winning field goal, and Toronto won 35-33, last play of the game. Prior to that, though, Hamilton had won every game against the Argos since the beginning of last year, and they're still 4-1 straight up and against the spread versus the Argos since the start of last year, including 2-0 straight up and against the spread at BMO Field in Toronto. Hamilton's kind of made this their second home. They've beaten the Argos 33-31, 51-38 in the last 2 games. 4 straight overs in this series, so I like this over at 57.5. I like Hamilton money line to bounce back here after that blowout loss against Winnipeg. Toronto kind of realizing with the loss to Montreal and the loss last week to BC, back-to-back weeks, that, their faint playoff hopes are kind of slipping away. So I think this spot sets up very nicely for the Ticats. I'll take them here, minus 125. Probably will sprinkle on their team total as well, over 29.5. Again, this Hamilton team has scored in the 3 games against the Argos, they've scored 33, 51, and 33. 33 and 51, I should say, this year. And then going back to last year, they scored 33 and 31 and 27 in the 3 meetings. So they have basically gone over their team total, the Ticats, 4 straight times against the Argos. I think they probably got a good chance to go over that team total. So I like Hamilton money line, little piece of the team total over as well, and the full game over. Because the one thing is I could see still Toronto scoring points. I don't think Hamilton's going to shut them down completely. We are talking about a Hamilton defense that gave up 40 points last week. So I still think Toronto will move the football and put up some points, but I think Hamilton gets the extra stops on defense to secure the victory. All right, Calgary and BC. We've got BC 3.5-point home favorites, 55.5 the total in this game. BC line, what's amazing about BC and this great run that their offense has been on, and Nathan Rourke especially, is that last week they fought, if you watch that Toronto BC game, that was like a C- game for Nathan Rourke. I don't think he was all that sharp. I don't think he was all that great. I think there were times where everything was just a little bit off for Nathan Rourke in that game. So, when you watch that game, it felt like watching it that it was his off game, that it was his, subpar game. And then you look up at the final score and you still see, well, they won the game and they still scored 27 points. And that's like with Nathan Rourke's C- game. I'd even go D+ game. Like I said, that was not the same quality of performance from Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions that we had seen the last 2 weeks, where they put up the 38 spot against Ottawa at home. I think he played almost a perfect game there. You could probably say the same thing about when they went into Calgary against this very same Stampeders team 2 weeks ago, and they put a 52 spot on the board, 52 points, and a 52-23 win. And keep in mind, that was a game where they didn't have James Butler available, and here's Nathan Rourke doing whatever he wanted, throwing the ball, running with the football. His legs and his ability to run kind of became a substitute for the absence of James Butler in that game against Calgary. But then you go to the game last week against Toronto. It just felt like they were not quite, everything was coming so quickly, and they were just scoring so quickly, so easily in the 2 games prior to last week when they faced Ottawa and Calgary. Last week they had to grind their way to more of their yards and points. and end up getting the ball in the end zone. So, like I said, I just feel watching that game that it wasn't Nathan Rourke's best performance, and yet they still ended up with the 27-22 victory. So they scored 27 points when it looked like Nathan Rourke and the offense weren't clicking anywhere close to the way they were 2 weeks ago. So, and then you got to wonder what is wrong with Calgary's defense. It's probably why they went out and they got Malden from Ottawa. They need a pass rush. All of a sudden, they're not really getting to the quarterback. The defense has definitely started to really become unglued here for Calgary. They gave up 31 points against Edmonton in the Labor Day rematch, lost that game outright as favorites. 52 points allowed to Nathan Rourke and BC, lost outright as favorites. And then last week against the Montreal Alouettes, Davis Alexander's return, where you still have some concern that just maybe Davis Alexander, a little rusty. He had been out for a while. And you watch Davis Alexander pick apart that Calgary defense last week. He didn't skip a beat. He didn't look like he had been out at all. And he didn't miss any time. 38 points. He just absolutely carved up the Calgary Stampeders secondary throughout that game. It was just, he did whatever he wanted. 350 passing yards, no interceptions, even with a banged up, running back group. There was no Travis Tice last week due to injury. And they also had Sean Thomas Erlington out again. Like Stevie Scott was the really only running back left on the depth chart, and he had success running the ball against Calgary. So it was a great effort by Montreal's offense, but it was another rough night. That's 3 games in a row. The Calgary defense has absolutely fallen apart. And you wonder if they're capable of getting it back again. But now they get a second chance at a BC team that lit them up for 52 points just 2 weeks ago. I think they're going to be in tough to stop BC again. I just haven't seen any improvement, any progress from Calgary's defense. What I do think, though, will happen for Calgary's offense is Vernon Adams does not want to look bad 2 games in a row against BC. 2 weeks ago, he had those 2 interceptions early, put his team behind the 8 ball, didn't finish the game because he got hurt in the second half. And he was amped up to play BC for the first time since they decided, you know what, Nathan Rourke, we're going to go with him as our quarterback. You can kick rocks and go elsewhere. He wanted that when Vernon Adams had to play that badly for the first half of that game and then to get injured and have to leave the game. Bad taste in his mouth, I'm sure, Vernon Adams, after that game. And he's going to want to make amends for that here on Saturday night, returning to BC Place Stadium for the first time as a member of the Stampeders since parting ways with the Lions in the offseason. So I think he will play better here. Make your adjustment. I mean, Dave Dickinson's supposed to be an offensive-minded guy. Make your adjustments. Find out what worked, what didn't work the first time around when you played the BC Lions. And in fairness to Vernon Adams, now last week he still had a bad interception. He seems to make that one interception, bad mistake a week. That's starting to become too much of a prevalent thing now with VA the last few weeks, is that critical mistake. So he's got to extricate that from his game. But he did at least play pretty solid. They got the run game going with Dedrick Mills against Montreal, and they did score 20 points. But unfortunately, they bogged down a few times. There was some turnovers. And then, of course, Vernon Adams, still made one critical interception in that game. But I have no doubt Vernon Adams is going to be a supremely motivated individual Saturday night, getting a second chance against his former team, knowing that the first time he got to play his former team just 2 weeks ago, it was about as bad as you could ask for. He played well. He played poorly. The defense played poorly. And then he gets injured and has to leave the game to boot the game in Calgary 2 weeks ago against BC. So Vernon Adams is going to want redemption for that. I kind of think Calgary could be the play here at +3.5. I just wish I trusted the defense more, because this defense has just completely crumbled. And I don't know if facing Nathan Rourke and this surging Lions offense, put it this way, BC had a bad game last week and they still scored 27 points. That tells you all you need to know about where Nathan Rourke and this BC Lions offense is at from a confidence standpoint. And what if they get Dejon Allen and Broxton, a couple of their injured offensive linemen back, BC? Because keep in mind, they've been operating without a fully healthy O-line the last couple of weeks. What if this BC team's able to get Jarrell Broxton and Dijon Allen back? What if Javon Catoy comes back from injury? And he was practicing in full the last time I checked on Thursday, the last practice. So, this Calgary defense, man, it's been bad. And I don't know if I fully trust them, but I'm still leaning Calgary plus 3.5. This could be one of those over trifecta spots that I love. Both team totals go over, BC's. And BC's team total finally went under for the first time in 9 games last week against Toronto. It barely went under, but it did go under. I think it probably have a chance to get back up and over their team total this week of 30.5. Calgary's team total over 25.5. I think it can get there in this game. I do. BC, they gave up 22 to Toronto last week, but let's not forget, this is still a defense that's given up 30s and 40s quite a bit. You got to think VA is chomping at the bit for a bounce back performance. So the Stamps team total over 25.5. I don't hate that. And of course, the full game over 55.5. Now, finally, again, an under, and the full game under for Toronto BC last week snapped what was a 8-game over streak, 8 consecutive game over streak for BC. But hard to bet an under with these two teams, these two quarterbacks, these two defenses. And Calgary's, like I said, has just completely and utterly gone into the garbage chute, their defense in these last 3 games. So that's kind of the approach here. I could see both team totals over, the full game over. If I were to bet this game from a point spread standpoint, again, my lean here is Calgary plus 3.5. I just don't know if I'm ready to fully trust their defense. I think VA will go out there, play well. I really do. I don't think he's going to lay that egg the second time around against BC the way he did 2 weeks ago. And it means more emotionally to you when you go back to the place, go back to BC and the place and the team that said, sayonara, we're going to go with Nathan Rourke instead. Could be more meaningful spot here for VA to step up and say, you know what, I'll show you. So, like I said, Calgary plus 3.5 lean. But if I were to bet Calgary, I'd feel better about the team total over. Because I don't know, but relying on that defense right now with how they've been shredded 3 straight weeks, it's not exactly something that's enticing me to put my faith, put my dollars, more importantly, in this Calgary defense right now. All right, there you have it. That is the Week 18 CFL preview. Let's wrap it up with a best bet. Sometimes you got to go homer, and I am going to go homer with best bet. I am a Ticat fan. I am a Ticat season ticket holder. I think this is the time and the spot to back them. Blowout loss, still against Winnipeg last week. Bounce back spot. They're 4-1 straight up in ATS against Toronto the last 2 years, including both games in Toronto. The Ticats won and covered both of them. I think history repeats itself here. Hamilton, minus 125 on the money line against Toronto. We're going to eat them raw. Oski Wee Wee on Saturday. Hamilton, minus 125 for my best bet for CFL Week 18. That's a wrap. I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy CFL Week 18 and good luck. And we'll see you next week for another CFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.